All right, good morning, guys. We've got 2 cameras today, so I'm going to be kind of trying to make my way up and down. We got a Facebook camera in the balcony. We got a YouTube camera down here on the floor. And so we will be trying to, I will be trying to remember that today as we meet. But just want to say thank you for joining us today as we worship. Thank you, guys, for being faithful to come during all this stuff. So just a few announcements to get us started. Just a reminder, if anybody's going through anything and you need help with anything, please call the church office, 643-5001. Love to see how we can help you in whatever needs you may have. Also, on top of that, if you haven't checked out our YouTube channel yet, it doesn't film live, but it does. We record it and then we post it as soon as the internet allows us to do that. And so that's kind of where we are with that. But you can look us up on YouTube under Wesson Church. Other than that, just a couple of announcements. This week's Bible challenge is Titus chapters 1 through 3, so the entire book of Titus, and 1 Peter chapters 1 through 2. We are starting to figure out some technology things in terms of small groups. Our youth are actually meeting on the WhatsApp and having conversation that way. My small group is meeting over the Google Duo app. And so if you're interested in getting plugged in, your group's not plugged in yet, let me know and we'll try to make something happen there. As of right now, all camps are still a go. And so I just want to say that, especially for our children. The girls' camp is June 8th through 12th. And so we still are having to get everything in by April 27th. And so just to keep that on your mind, and boys' camp is July 20th through 24th. And you have to go online to check that out. And again, you can get that information at the office. We can let you know what's going on there. Other than that, here's a big, exciting announcement. We are finally going to have the guts to try something new. And so we are planning for Easter Sunday to invite you to get out of your house, okay? If Trump hasn't already opened the nation, we're inviting you to come and do a drive-in worship service Easter Sunday. Invite your friends, and we're just going to pull up, and we're going to set up just like Founders Day. We're going to have a couple of trailers. We're going to put the praise team on the trailers. We're going to do a baptism or a few baptisms on those trailers. We've got a whole deal lined up, and so I want to invite you. I'm excited about it. Having our Easter Sunday service, same time. 10:45 in the morning, not a sunrise service, but outside in our north parking lot. And so looking forward to that. And then last but not least here this is our time for offering. And so we've already taken up an offering here, but at home I encourage you to go to PayPal. Look us up at wbc.office@westonbaptistchurch.com. And you can put your offering in that way. You can always drop off your offering at the office itself from 9 to 3, Monday through Friday, or you can mail it to P.O. Box 397 to bring it to mail it to the church. We need your gifts as we continue to try to serve this community and love people with the love of Jesus. And so, anyways, we're going to open up with a word of prayer. I'm going to pray over these offerings as you give right now. I encourage you, take this time. Huddle around your TV, around your iPad, whatever it may be. Open up God's Word with us. Pull out your Bible. Stand up, sing, raise your hands, close your eyes. Get involved in what God's doing this morning. And so let's pray. Lord, I love you. I thank you so much for Jesus Christ, God, who gave it all for us. And so, Father, right now, in the name of Jesus, God, we pray as our offerings are coming in, that you would take these offerings, that you would multiply these offerings, Father, and that you would use these offerings, that we may be able to be a continual light into the community that you have placed us. And so, Father, bless this time, God. Bless this time as we come before you with our hearts bowed low and our hands lifted high, praising Jesus Christ, our King. And so, God, just make much of the name of Jesus today. And God, use us as your servants to go and do what you call us to in the world we live in right now. Lord, I love you. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Ask that you would stand up as we worship this morning. Who breaks the power of sin and darkness? Whose love is mighty and so much stronger? The King of glory, the King above all kings, who shakes the whole earth and holds them. Who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder and leaves us breathless in awe and wonder? The King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. Yeah, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing, Lord, all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order? Who makes the orphan a son and daughter? The King of glory, the King of glory, who rules the nations with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of his brilliance. The King of glory, the King above all kings. Come on, sing it out. Yeah, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing, Lord, all that you've done for me. Worthy is the Lamb, worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, worthy. Oh, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing, Lord, all that you've done for me. Amen. What an amazing grace it is to our God. And God, we serve the only God. In all this craziness that is going on, God is in control. And so this next song that we're going to sing is You Are God Alone. And the first part we're going to talk about is what God isn't. He's not a God that humans created. He's not dependent on us. And he's not in need of anything that we can give. And it's just by his plan. He has a plan for us. And so we've got to trust that God is in control through all this. right now, in the good times and bad. You are on your throne. You are God alone. You're unchangeable. You're unshakable. You're unstoppable. That's what you are. You're unchangeable. You're unshakable. You're unstoppable. That's what you are. You are God before time began. You are on your throne. You are God alone. And right now, in the good times and bad, you are on your throne. You are God alone. Listen to this one. You are God alone from before time began. You are on your throne. You are God alone. And right now, in the good times and bad, you are on your throne. You are God alone. He's unchangeable. You're unchangeable. You're unshakable. You're unstoppable. That's what you are. You're unchangeable. You're unshakable. You're unstoppable. That's what you are.
Amen. Amen. Let us go to Lord in prayer. Father, we love you. God, just ask in the name of Jesus, Father, that God, you would reveal yourself even more today. God, that we would draw closer to Jesus, Lord. Lord, that our hearts, Father, would feel the movement of your Spirit. God, that you would do a work in us. And Lord, that we would respond to it in faith, in obedience, and in joy. God, use this time as we dive into your word. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Go ahead and open up God's Word with me to Exodus chapter 3. We're continuing in our series called Departing to Arrive, and today's message is simply entitled, Who Am I? And so we're in Exodus chapter 3. We're actually going to cover a pretty large swath of text today. So we're going to be starting in Exodus 3, but we're going to be moving all the way into Exodus chapter 6. And so you can just follow along. Now, as you turn there, I'll just start by saying I love all of my babies. I'm a proud papa, and each one of them has so many unique gifts, so many unique traits, characteristics that God has given them. And so it's a delight for me as a dad to see my babies grow. It's a delight for me to see how God is forming them, how He's wired them, how He's configured them to grow more and more into His image. With all that said, the truth is my babies ain't perfect either, right? We know that, and the way that I usually say that is they take that from their mother, right? No? Okay. And so, some of their flaws are pretty evident. And so, what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to get on Facebook Live and start bashing my kids and naming all of their flaws out loud. But I want to focus on one that seems to find a lot of footing in our home. And it's a tendency to have a kind of woe is me type of attitude. And with that attitude that happens in our house, there's a pretty common phrase that just drives me crazy. And the phrase is, I can't. And as a dad, I'll just say, I can't stand it, right? And so if they're making breakfast or whatever, and they'll say, hey, Dad, can you pour the milk into the bowl? And I'll say, no, you can do that. And they'll say, but I can't. And right? Just kind of crawls on me there. If we're outside trying to play sports, and I say, catch the ball with your glove, or just use both hands and shoot towards the goal, I can't. If we're doing a math problem at home, in Carly homeschools, y'all know that. And so this person has this many eggs, and this person has this many eggs. You put these eggs together, how many eggs do you have? What's the answer? I don't know. I can't figure it out. That sort of stuff. And obviously, most of the time for these sort of things, after they say I can't, they end up actually going and doing it, right? And it's usually a response like this, oh, well, I guess I could, right? And it just kind of drives me bonkers. As a dad, it just kind of drives me bonkers. But if we're honest, that's where we find one of the great heroes of our faith this morning. In that woe is me, I can't attitude. Now, where we were last week is we saw that God, through a burning bush encounter, revealed himself to this hero, revealed himself to Moses as the eternal, immortal, immutable, invisible, omnipresent, all-knowing, all-powerful, perfectly good, perfectly loving, perfectly holy God of all creation. Yet despite all that God is, Moses still has to wrestle with the question, who am I? Who am I? And I think this is a question that we all come to at different points in our walk with the Lord. David asked it like this in Psalm chapter 8. He says, what is man that you are mindful of him, the Son of Man that you care for him? And we ask it in our hearts. When God has placed something in our lives, God has placed a challenge in our lives that maybe we've never faced before, maybe we don't know how to face, maybe we don't know how to go through this. A lot of times, this same insecurity, the same question rises up in us, but it's asked a little bit different. We ask it like, why me? Or why now? Or why this? Like, our reasoning is, I know my past. And I know my limitations, and I know my fears, and I know what I'm actually thinking. Even though everybody else thinks I'm okay, I know what's actually going on in this brain of mine. God, you want to rethink this and give this to someone else? Because I'm just not sure that I'm the right person for this job. And right here in our text this morning, Moses is dealing with this same sort of insecurity. And Moses is about to give us 5 excuses for the reason that God should not use him. But before we dive into the text and those excuses, I want to start with something that I want to just be careful not to overlook in this text. What God is calling Moses to do is over the top difficult. we need to understand that. What God is calling Moses to do here is almost beyond reason that God or anybody would ask anybody to do what he's asking Moses to do. He is sending Moses to face not only his past, having come from being raised in the Egyptian kingdom and leaving for the last 40 years, but not only to face his past, but to think this, and we have to think in terms of modern history to kind of even get a grasp on this, but to confront the dictator of the world's mightiest nation face to face. And tell that dictator, hey, I'm going to take all of your workforce with me. And by the way, all of that workforce is, most experts kind of predict or guess that it's somewhere between 2 to 3 million people. More, or right around the same size of the entire population of the state of Mississippi. And so, Moses, this one man, has to go face this Hitler-like dictator, right? And then he's got to go take 2 to 3 million people and lead them through the wilderness, right? Like, this is not some mediocre, just kind of easy task. And if we put it to where we realistically are today, think about us. We struggle with telling our neighbor about Jesus. We struggle with sometimes telling our kids about Jesus. This is an overwhelming, almost undoable task. Go tell Pharaoh, who believes he's God, that he's not God, and the real God's about to prove it by taking all of your slaves and taking them with me. And so I start there just to say this. We've got to be careful not to judge Moses as he's making these excuses as if God had called us, we would have just stepped into it. That's nonsense. Absolute nonsense. And so the reality is, though, God does call his children. Every one of us, if we're a follower of Jesus, God calls every one of us into seasons of some really hard stuff. Here's just some ideas, just some examples to throw out there. Maybe you're going through a season of sickness. Maybe you're caring for someone who's going through a season of sickness or dying. We have a couple families in our church who are fostering children. Maybe you're going through the wrestle, the difficulty of that. Maybe you're confronting sin. That someone in your life has sinned against you or has sinned against others, and you know that you need to confront it. Maybe you are leaving a place of comfort, leaving a place of security to dive into the unknown. The unknown maybe of a new job. The unknown of, hey, instead of keeping a safe distance, I'm going to go and do what Jesus tells me to do and repair some old relationships. Maybe it's God's moving me out of this one season of life into this new season of life, and so I got to go back to school, and I'm terrified to go back to school. Maybe it's just simply standing up for what is right when everybody else seems to be going the other way. Whatever it may be, God calls every one of us at different times in our lives to face daunting challenges. And the easiest thing that we can do is to make excuses why I can't. I can't do it, God. And so here's what we find. We find 5 excuses given by Moses why he can't. And even though they come from his lips, I am convinced that they translate really well into our hearts. Really well into our lives. And so we're going to start in chapter 3, verses 11 and 12. And we start with the first excuse. It says, but Moses, all right, so God has just laid out the plan for Moses. He says, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go into Egypt, and you're going to talk to Pharaoh and tell him to let these people go so they can come worship me. And so Moses, in verse 11, replies, but Moses asked God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the Israelites out of Egypt? He answered, I will certainly be with you, and this will be the sign to you that I am the one who sent you. When you bring the people out of Egypt, you will all worship God at this mountain. Now, we get this very first excuse, and the excuse, if we kind of want to put it into our own words, is, I'm not qualified. Right? And so Moses really, from the beginning, is asking the biggest question to start with. Who am I? Right? Translation, again, I am not qualified. Ever been there before? All of the people who aren't here, I can imagine your hands being raised right now. We've been there, right? We've been there. We've had these thoughts before. I am not qualified for what is being asked. Now, I do want to be clear here. This is not Moses' humility that is rising to the surface here. This is Moses' fear that is rising to the surface here. Now, don't get me wrong. Moses may have genuinely felt unworthy of this monumental task, but ultimately the truth is he doesn't want to be the right choice. He doesn't want to be the man God calls to this position. And so what he does is he throws out a classic excuse that people use in relationships. God, it's not you, it's me. Right? I'm the problem. And I just love, if you look at God's response, God is way more kookier than I would be. But if you look at God's response, in essence, what God says is, no kidding. No kidding. I know you're not qualified, right? Like, exactly. Like, this is my translation of how God said this. Do you think that I am stupid enough to put my fame and my glory in your hands? Are you kidding me? Listen, God knows that Moses is not up for the task, so he tells him what we all need to hear. God says, I will certainly be with you. It is a certainty. It's not, will I be with you? It's not, do you feel me now? It's whether you feel me or you don't feel me. Know this, in certainty, I am with you. God's saying, this is my job. This is my power. And you are my tool. And so if God is calling us to something, listen, God will be there to pull us through that something. You don't have to be good enough because God is more than enough. And this is ultimately the foundational answer for the rest of Moses' excuses. So we start off with kind of the big, all-consuming one. And really, as we look at the next four excuses, they're all just almost ways of fleshing out this bigger one. Right? It's just I'm going to get into a little more detail of why I'm not qualified, God. And so we're going to look at those particularly because I'm convinced that we all use these. And so the next excuse happens in verse 13. It says, then Moses asked God, if I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What should I tell them? Here's excuse number 2. I don't know enough. I don't know enough. How am I supposed to go tell these people about you? I don't even know your name. Right? Like, I don't even know who you are. This is the first time we've ever met. Like, how often do we feel ill-prepared to do the work of God? I don't have enough training. I don't have enough education. I'm convinced that the enemy has used this excuse as one of the major barriers from keeping the church in doing our responsibility that God's given us to make disciples. This is one of the major tools the enemy has used. You don't know the word well enough. And if you don't know the word well enough, someone is going to challenge you, and they're going to make you look foolish, and you don't want to look foolish. And so don't say anything. Or you haven't been equipped adequately. And so you just wait for the next time that your church offers a course, some sort of class on learning how to share your faith, learning how to talk to people about Jesus. You wait until then, and at that point, unlike every other time in the past, you'll prioritize it, you'll learn it, you'll be trained, and then you will go and be able to do it. Listen, those are lies. If you've been genuinely saved, here's one thing that you definitely have. You have a story. You have a God story. You have a story of who you were before Jesus Christ. You have a story of how Jesus came and wooed you and pulled you to himself. And you have a story of who you are since Christ has come into your life. You don't have to be able to quote lots of scripture. Don't get me wrong, it helps. It helps. But it's not required. You don't have to memorize a gospel presentation. Again, it helps. But it's not required. It makes me think back to John chapter 9 that Jesus heals a man who is blind. And the Pharisees are investigating, hey, what's the deal? What's the deal with this Jesus that's healing you? Is he a sinner? And the man replies, whether he's a sinner or not, I have no clue. Nelson translation, I don't know. He says, one thing I do know. I was blind, but now I see. One thing I do know is Jesus interacted with my life, and I'm not the same anymore. That's the testimony that God gives us. And so what God does here is he rejects Moses' second excuse of not knowing enough and actually says, okay, well then I'll give you the information. And if you read on in the text a little bit right there, what you'll see is he says, I'll give you what to say in the moment. And that's the truth for us as well. Even when we don't feel like we know enough, God in that moment, at his divine appointments, will show up and give us what to say in that moment. And so that excuse is busted for Moses, and so he has to move to number 3. Chapter 4, verses 1 through 9. Moses answered, what if they won't believe me and will not obey me, but say, the Lord did not appear to you? The Lord asked him, what is that in your hand? A staff, he replied. Throw it on the ground, he said. So Moses threw it on the ground. It became a snake, and he ran from it. I love that scene. The Lord told Moses, stretch out your hand and grab it by the tail. So he stretched out his hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand. This will take place, he continued, so that they will believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has appeared to you. In addition, the Lord said to him, put your hand inside your cloak. So he put his hand inside his cloak, and when he took it out, his hand was diseased, resembling snow. Put your hand back inside your cloak, he said. So he put his hand back inside his cloak, and when he took it out, it had again become like the rest of his skin. If they will not believe you and will not respond to the evidence of the first sign, they may believe the evidence of the second sign. And if they don't believe even these two signs, or listen to what you say, take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground. The water you take from the Nile will become blood on the ground. And so, we get to our third excuse. And the third excuse is the never-ending cycle of what-if questions. It's the never-ending cycle of what-if questions. What if the elders won't listen? Moses says. Well, if they don't listen, we find out a couple chapters later, his reasoning was, if they don't listen, then certainly Pharaoh won't listen. And if Pharaoh doesn't listen, then more than likely, I'm going to be killed. And if I'm killed, who's going to take care of my family? Who are you going to use to rescue these people? And on we can go. It's a never-ending cycle of questions. If you look at our society right now, and not just in America, but around the world, we are in one giant loop of what-if questioning right now with the COVID-19 stuff. I have a family member right now in Louisiana who has the coronavirus. And because he has the coronavirus, he is locked away in his bedroom for 14 days. Now here's the thing. He's locked away in his bedroom, but his family, his wife and his two girls, they're locked away inside the house. And so he's in quarantine inside the bedroom. They're in quarantine inside the house for 14 days alongside of him. And so here's where this becomes a problem. His wife has to prepare him food. He can't leave this room. She has to prepare him stuff. So what if she gets it? And if she gets it, as she's dealing with and blessing and loving her girls, what if one of them gets it? And as the girls are playing together, what if now the other sister gets it? What if everybody gets it and it's all spread out, and now we're at home for the next 2 months because we're in this seemingly permanent quarantine that's going on in our home, right? This is the cyclical pattern of what-if questioning. And it becomes overwhelming, and all it does is raise fears up in us that we have zero control over. And this is the place where we have to let go and allow God to be in control. And that's the point of these signs to Moses. This is God's way of telling Moses, stop worrying and stop trying to control your situation. God's saying, listen, I've got it, but you got to trust me. That's the rules. Kid diving off the diving board into mom and dad's hands for the first time. I've got it, but you've got to trust me. So God, love God, man. God turns to Moses and says, hey, throw that staff on the ground, right? Throws his staff on the ground. And there's a lot of symbolism here, right? Like a snake, a serpent was a major image in the Egyptian world, an image of Pharaoh himself. But what's going on here is this is a trust test. And so Moses throws the staff down, it becomes a snake, and it says he hits the road. He's like, no! Man, it's like one of those email things that you pop up and it's like, that scary face that pops up again. Like all of a sudden this is a snake, and he's like, what? I can't believe you did that to me, God, man. I gotta get back on my blood pressure medicine, that sort of deal. And so it's kind of a terrifying scene. And then God's like, now go pick him up. Seriously? You want me to do what? Does anybody know what happens when you pick a snake up by the tail? You get bit by a snake. That's the rule. This is what happens. You pick a snake up by the tail, you get bit by a snake. But that's the point. Listen, church, whoever else may be listening, if God throws an opportunity out there for you, are you going to be willing to pick it up? If God throws something scary out there, if God throws something that is completely confusing out there, if God throws something that I would never do of my own accord out there, are you going to be willing to pick it up? God is showing Moses, listen, I control the serpent. Read Pharaoh there. I control Pharaoh. I control the well-being of the Egyptians. When he says, put your hand in the cloak, it becomes leprous. Put your hand back in the cloak, it becomes clean again. What's he saying? I control the well-being of people. I'm not only in control of the leader, I'm in control of everybody over there. And then he's even starting to point a little bit to the plagues that he's about to send. And he says, I even control nature. By taking that water out of the Nile, pouring it on the ground, and turning it into blood. And so God is basically saying, stop asking what if. What if will get you nowhere? What if will paralyze you? Open up your hands and let God be God. Leads us to our fourth excuse, verses 10 through 12. It says that Moses replied to the Lord, please, Lord, I have never been eloquent either in the past or recently or since you have been speaking to your servant because my mouth and my tongue are sluggish. The Lord said to him, who placed a mouth on humans? Who makes a person mute or deaf, seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go! I will help you speak, and I will teach you what to say. This is the one that gets the most attention. This is the excuse that gets all the publicity, is that Moses wasn't a good speaker. But ultimately what this is the excuse that says, I'm not equipped for this assignment. This particular job description does not jive with my personality test, right? Like I went to work, I took my DISC test, and my DISC test told me that I'm better out there in the wilderness tending to sheep than I am going and confronting dictators. And so what I'm going to do, God, is I'm going to follow that, and I'm going to stay over here in the wilderness, and you go do that, and then we'll meet in the middle and see how everything went, right? Let's put a modern-day spin on it. My spiritual gifts assessment test says that I'm an intercessor, so I'm just going to pray from a distance. I know, God, you're calling me to do this, but you know what? I'm going to do my part in it. I don't have to take the whole thing. I'm going to do my part. I'm going to be the prayer side, while you can let someone else be the actual action side. We are so good. We are so creative. We are so clever at finding ways to tell God no. But God is not interested in what you're good at. God is interested in your obedience. And he has a long history of using unequipped people to do absolutely amazing things. In the book of Judges, there's this guy named Gideon. Gideon, by all accounts, is a coward. Gideon is constantly hiding, constantly testing, doesn't want anything to do with confrontation. What does God do with this coward? He calls him to lead an unarmed army of 300 men to go defeat an armed army of thousands upon thousands of men. There's this prophet named Jonah. Jonah hates a certain people group called the Ninevites. He hates them. He wants them to die. He wants them to perish apart from God. What does God say? No, actually, you're going to be my instrument to go and lead them to repentance. There's this little whippersnapper out in the field named David. And God, through his prophet Samuel, is going to anoint a new king, a future king for Israel. And he says it's going to be from the house of Jesse. And so Jesse, David's father, says, let me go grab all my boys. And he lines up all his boys from oldest to youngest. But he considers David so insignificant, so unworthy. He says, I'm just going to leave that little boy out in the field. And let him pick from all these other ones. Because surely he's not qualified. And Samuel says, none of these guys are it. You got any more kids? Right? And David becomes this king who becomes the heir apparent to Jesus. The one on the throne from whose line Jesus comes. Our problem, guys, is we make the mistake at looking at ourselves instead of looking to God. That's our problem. We look at all that's wrong with us instead of looking at all that's right with God. And this is both irreverent and it is equally irrelevant. It is irreverent because we are basically saying to God, and my wife gets on me when I do this woe is me stuff. It's irreverent because we're saying to God, like, you must have messed up in making me, or you messed up in using me and choosing me for this particular task. But my God is all-knowing, and my God is all-powerful, and my God is all good. And he says, I know you, I made you, and I choose you. And so when we say, I'm not equipped to do, God, what you have called me to do, I'm not going to be able to do that, then we are saying, God, you're not able to do that, and we are devaluing God. We are irreverent. But secondly, we are irrelevant. Because what we say and what we think doesn't really matter. God is able and God's plan will be accomplished. Listen, God does not need specialists. God uses obedience. And we get to our final excuse here in chapter 4, verses 13 through 17. And it's just straight to the point. Moses said, please, Lord, send someone else. Please. Verse 14, then the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he said, isn't Aaron the Levite your brother? I know that he can speak well, and also he is on his way now to meet you. He will rejoice when he sees you. You will speak with him and tell him what to say. I will help both you and him to speak and will teach you both what to do. He will speak to the people for you. He will serve as a mouth for you, and you will serve as God for him. So Moses, again, finally just kind of cuts to the chase in his final excuse. I'm not the man. Pick someone else because there's got to be someone better than me. Just pick someone else because there's got to be someone who's better at this than me. Now God gets angry with Moses for this, for the same reason that we just said, the irreverent side, devaluing what God can do. But in his mercy, in his grace, he assigns Aaron, Moses' older brother, to be a spokesperson for him. And so I think what we need to do in order to kind of understand this excuse is we need to step back from it a little bit and look at the bigger picture. We need to understand what's going on big picture-wise. First off, when Moses says, I'm not the man for the job, I need someone else, he is showing a lack of trust for God. But what Moses finds out down the road is that God is enough. And before we even get into the place where we are now in the wilderness, the role has already transitioned back to the role that God wanted it to be in the first place. It starts with Aaron doing all the speaking for Moses, but pretty quickly it switches over and Moses is doing all the speaking for himself. Moses, as he's walking under the power of God, begins to realize, oh, God is enough. So I can do it through God. But then here's the second thing. Because Moses basically begged God to send someone else, because Moses pleaded with God, he put Aaron, his brother, in a position of leadership and authority within the people of Israel. What happens because of that? After they are brought out of Egypt, it is Aaron who leads the people into idolatry by building a golden calf for a people to worship instead of worshiping God. And then later, he leads the people into complaining along with his sister Miriam, causing a near riot and rebellion against Moses. And so I like how Warren Wiersbe says this. He says, when God in his anger gives us what we selfishly want, that gift rarely turns out to be a blessing. One of the most painful judgments God can send is to let his people have their own way. And so the point here is obvious. God knows us better than we know ourselves. We don't have to let God know our shortcomings. He already knows. He created us intricately. He created us intentionally. He created us wonderfully and fearfully. And He knows everything about us. So if He leads us into something, He knows what He's doing. Now, a quick few pointers here. That does not mean that what God is calling you to will be easy. When Moses is focusing on the big things, something slips his mind. He loses focus and remains faithful in the little things. I just want to show you this real quick. In chapter 4, verses 24 through 26, Moses finally concedes, finally says yes to God. I'm going to Egypt. He says, on the trip, in verse 24, at an overnight campsite, it happened that the Lord confronted him and intended to put him to death. So Zipporah took a flint, Zipporah is his wife, cut off her son's foreskin, threw it at Moses' feet, and said, "You are a bridegroom of blood to me." So he let him alone. At that time she said, "You are a bridegroom of blood," referring to the circumcision. And so here's the first thing. Moses is so focused on this big task that was specially crafted for him that he loses sight of the small task that God called every Jewish family to, which is circumcision, a covenant sign that we are the people of God. And let's tie this to ourselves. You may be in the middle of a season of transition. You may be in the middle of a season of God putting you through something hard, or using you to do things for His kingdom in hard ways, whatever it may be. Just because you're focused on that thing does not mean to lose focus on the things that you're already doing. We've got to stay committed to the small details of everyday Christian life. We've got to stay committed to prayer. We've got to stay committed to the Word. We've got to stay committed to speaking and fellowship as we talk to one another about our faith, our struggles, what's going on in our lives. We've got to stay committed in the day-to-day things as we focus on the big things, because these are not separate things. These are complementary things that build on each other. Secondly, and this one's important for anyone who might be going through a season of discouragement right now. Things often get worse before they get better, even as we're following the will of God. Things often get worse before they get better. You get to chapter 5, and when Moses and Aaron confront Pharaoh, he's not like, "I see the error of my way. Great, let me send the people with you." He says, "Are you kidding me? You're coming here to insult me?" Here's what I'm going to do. They're not going anywhere, but I'm going to make their work twice as hard. And so he doubles, basically, their labor. And by doing that, he gives them a job that's completely undoable, and then punishes them for their inability to do it. Listen, it is not uncommon when we walk into a plan that God has for us in our lives to feel discouragement, to feel a sense of being overwhelmed. It's not uncommon at all. It's not uncommon to have thoughts like, "It wasn't supposed to be like this. This is not what I was expecting. This is not what I signed up for. If I'm serving God, why would He allow this to happen? Why would He allow my feelings to feel like this?" And this is exactly where Moses is. In chapter 5, verse 22 through 6:1, it says, "So Moses went back to the Lord and asked, 'Lord, why have you caused trouble for this people? And why did you ever send me? Ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has caused trouble for this people, and you haven't rescued your people at all.' But the Lord replied to Moses, 'Now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. Because of a strong hand, he will let them go, and because of a strong hand, he will drive them from his land.'" Basically, this is what happened. Moses says, "This isn't working, God. You told me that this would work. You told me that we would go. You told me that this would happen. This is not working, God." He's discouraged. He's overwhelmed. And God's response is, "Now you'll see what I can do. You've just seen what you can't do. Now check out what I can do. Listen, guys, when we walk in difficult obedience, we are setting the stage for God to do something huge through us. And as I call Cullen up here, we're just going to end by just kind of asking this question. Okay, so God's called me to walk in difficult obedience, whatever it may be. How do I continue to walk that out when it's so hard? And so I think we're just going to read just a little bit more of the text in chapter 6. And we're going to see promises, 6 promises of God. And this is the reality. What we do in these seasons of discouragement is we cling to the promises of God. And so just follow along with me. It's chapter 6, starting in verse 2. It says, Then God spoke to Moses, telling him, I am the Lord. Moving down to verse 6, it says, Therefore tell the Israelites, I am the Lord. I will bring you out from the forced labor of the Egyptians and rescue you from slavery to them. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and great acts of judgment. I will take you as my people, and I will be your God. You will know that I am the Lord your God who brought you out from the forced labor of the Egyptians. I will bring you to the land that I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you. God starts laying out promises. He knows Moses is struggling. He knows that Moses feels like, man, I'm ready to give up. I can't keep fighting this fight. This is too much for me. And so God says, listen, stop making it about you. I will bring you out and rescue you from slavery. That is a promise of salvation. He says, I will redeem you. That is a promise of redemption from where you were to where I am leading you to go. He says, I will take you as my people. I will be your God. That is a promise of adoption. You're going to be with me. You're part of my family. I ain't letting anything happen to my family. I will bring you to the land and I will give it to you. That is a promise of inheritance. You're not just with me for a little bit. You are with me for the long haul. My kingdom is your kingdom. And these promises are the assurance that what God has called Moses to is not in vain, but that he will accomplish his purposes through Moses. And so just like we saw last week, that all of who God is wrapped up in Jesus Christ, so all of the promises of God for his people are fulfilled in Jesus. Jesus is our salvation. Jesus is our redemption. Jesus adopts us as his children, and Jesus guarantees our inheritance in heaven. Jesus is the assurance that what God has called us to is not in vain. In Jesus, God accomplishes his purposes through us. Listen, guys, our obedience to the Lord starts with our relationship with Jesus. And so as you sit in a den or sit in a kitchen or a bedroom, wherever you may be, maybe you're listening to the podcast and you're driving down the road as you're hearing this. Do you have a relationship with Jesus? Listen, if you don't, turn your life over to him. And I want to encourage you. We put phone numbers on the WhatsApp if you're a church member. We put it on the Western Baptist Church Facebook page if you're not a member and you don't have these numbers, but anybody can get access to it. And we put 5 phone numbers, and we encourage you, if God is stirring in your heart, this is your time of your response. This is God saying, now look what I can do in your life. And so feel free to call the numbers that we have as you seek to pray and respond to God. But I'll also say this, if you are a follower of Jesus, you can walk in joyful obedience to whatever God has called you to, or whatever God may be calling you to. It makes me think of Paul. Book of Philippians, writing from the jail cell. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Christ is God's strength for your life. Plug into Him, and like Moses, watch His power work through you. Let's pray. Father, I love you. God, I just ask in the name of Jesus, Lord, that you would, God, just stir our hearts where we are. Lord, I know, I can think right now of half a dozen folks in our faith family alone who are walking through seasons, God, where there's transition, where there's newness, where things are difficult. But God, I also know that I am so limited in my knowledge. And Father, my guess is if I know half a dozen, Father, there's probably 10 times as many going on right now. And so, Father, I pray by your grace, whatever we're going through, whatever hard thing, Father, that we would trust in you. We would trust your hand. We would trust your power. We would trust your care. We would stop looking at us. We would stop making it about us. And God, we would turn all of ourselves over to you. God, you're the only one who's in control. So break our excuses. Break us from our excuses. And God, let us, with everything that's in us, humbly bow and submit ourselves to your work in our lives. God, I love you. I thank you. Do your work this morning. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amazing love that welcomes me, the kindness of mercy that bought with blood wholeheartedly my soul undeserving. You're so good. Oh God, you're so good. Oh God, you're so good. You're so good to behold the And should this life bring suffering, Lord, I will remember what Calvary has fought for me, both now and forever. You're so good. Oh God, you're so good. Oh God, you're so good. You're so good to me. Yes, oh God, you're so God, you're so good. Oh God, you're so good. Oh God, you're so good. You're so good to me.
Father God, we come to you this morning thanking you. Thanking you, God, that we can meet here today and we can worship you freely. Father God, we thank you for Brother Nelson and we thank you for Cullen leading us this morning, Lord. We ask you to reach out and touch each and every person, Lord, that's listening to this. Lord, we ask you to be with our country as we're going through a hard time right now. Be with our leaders, help them to make all the right decisions, Lord, to get us back on our feet to where we need to be. Your word, Lord, says, if we would hit our knees and praise you and call upon you, that you will heal our land. Father God, that's what we're doing. Lead us, guide us, and direct us, Lord, as we leave you today. And bring us back as soon as possible, Lord. In your precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen.